Really, our mission is bringing family and friends around the table. All right, guys, we have got another episode of At the Table with Ryan Lane. And I don't know, every time we sit down and talk just with another guest, like I'm kind of blown away by like where I never saw barbecue going. Mm-hmm. And so most of you guys, as this starts to play, will immediately recognize our guest's voice. If you're watching this, you'll even recognize him even faster. But our guest today is Erick Erickson. So thank you so much. Really,
thanks for having me.
Just for driving up to beautiful Bethlehem, Georgia. We got to see the manufacturing shop, and then we're over here now.
It's a great setup.
Doing the podcast. So when did we first connect?
It's wild how many people I have met over the last 5 or 6 years on Instagram. And I think that's how we first connected too. It's been a great way to meet, because the great thing about Instagram is you can kind of look and see, is this person crazy or not by what they're posting? And you seem sane, and I liked your barbecue rubs. So. Yeah.
That's because like you're only checking out that and not our OnlyFans account.
Totally. Right? Yes.
That one's totally different. No, just kidding. So just kidding, Stacy. But anyways, so 5 or 6 years ago, and here's what I love. And like most people are probably like, oh my gosh, I've never heard Ryan talk politics. It's probably not going to happen today either. So
excellent.
The reason why I wanted you to come on is because there's so much more than just politics. And I love, we're both huge fans of barbecue, bourbon, cigars. And really, I think that's our mission, is bringing family and friends around the table. Mm-hmm. And it's one of those like, I don't care where you're from. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like where you grew up, where like you were telling us a little bit ago, like what hometown are you?
Jackson, Louisiana.
So tell us a little bit about Jackson.
Okay. So when I was 5 years old, we actually moved overseas to Dubai, but we moved back to Jackson when I was 15. And it is a small town. The town, like when I moved to Georgia, people said, my town's so small, it only has one stoplight. My town was so small, they had a stoplight that they took out in the 50s because it scared the horses. And literally a tiny town, and everyone in town was related or knew each other in some capacity. The Methodist and the Baptist churches were right next to each other. In fact, when I was like 10 or 11, I think it was 11, I flew home from Dubai by myself for the summer before my parents came, was at church at the First Baptist Church, Jackson, Louisiana, built in 1821, still in the same building. My grandmother had a spell in church and she passes out. They think she has a heart attack. All of my cousins are in the Methodist church across the street, so I go to find them. And literally, I didn't actually find out until this year that the backstory there is that was that preacher's first day in the pulpit. And this boy comes in from the Baptist church, and literally one by one, the entire congregation leaves in the middle of this guy's first sermon ever. Yeah. And he thinks he's like offended the crowd or the Baptist shield. And it turns out, well, these are all my cousins in the Methodist church. They got to come to it's that sort of town, tiny. My grandfather had been the mayor of the town during World War II. My mom and my dad's from Coral Gables, Florida. Met my mom at Mississippi College and moved there. But then we packed up and moved overseas when I was a kid. But it was just, it was really like tiny town. To give you the ultimate sense of tiny town, I got my driver's license when I was 14 years old. In Louisiana, you have to be 15. And at the time, you didn't have to have learner's permits. But my dad had been the basketball coach of the head of the DMV. So my driving test was literally to take him to buy beer during work and come back. And he said, you passed, and gave me my license when I was 14.
That's crazy. So
small town America.
Jackson, Louisiana, and Dubai. So that's a little bit different.
Yes.
You know what I mean? What is like the biggest thing that kind of stands out, from each of those?
So my dad was in the oil business. And when I was 5, his company really told him, you're going to move here or find a new job. So we moved. And we would be there. We'd come home for about 3 months during the summer. But every 3 months, your visa expired, and my dad's company would pay for us to go to a different country for a week.
That's crazy.
So by the time I'm 15, I've been to 50 countries, and then moved back to a place in rural Louisiana where I'm the only kid of my graduating class who left the town. Which is just mind-blowing. I had friends who wound up moving away. They're all in Louisiana.
Yeah.
I moved to Georgia to go to college, and it was a completely different environment. It was really cool to live overseas. When I was 11, my parents let me fly home for the first time by myself. The plane crashed. 747, had to ditch it in Austria, caught on fire. It was kind of a wild experience. Got to spend the night in the red light district in Amsterdam as an 11-year-old by myself, and I had these wild experiences growing up that are kind of mind blowing. Now, like my wife hears these stories, she's like, "This was child abuse. Like, it's just how you grew up overseas."
That's crazy.
Yeah, it really was. It was very, very, like, looking back on it, like, it was a wild experience. But I mean, when I was 6 years old, I got to go to Cyprus and see where St. Paul was in Cyprus. Went to Malaysia a ton. When I was 7, I got to meet the president of Pakistan because there were no hotel rooms and we needed a hotel room, and he gave us one and introduced me to Toblerone bars, and got to meet Margaret Thatcher when I was a kid. It was random stuff growing up overseas.
No one's gonna want to listen to me like on future podcasts.
No.
They're gonna be like, "Can you bring Eric back just to host?"
It was just it was a wild experience, and then to
so
come back
cool.
to a tiny little town in Louisiana where remember my first day in public school. It was 10th grade, and the teacher, there's a kid in the class who did not know what the word liberty meant or what committee meant. And I'm like, where have I come? It was weird.
That's crazy. All right. So when did you move? You moved away from there when you
Yes.
went to college, and college was in
Mercer University in Macon, Georgia.
Yep.
Moved there in 93. Wanted to get out of Louisiana as quick as I could.
Yeah.
Moved over there, met my wife, and our roommates were engaged to each other till my roommate decided he was gay. Christy and I stayed in touch. She moved home, fell out of the engineering school, and her dad was like, "I'm not paying for private school if you're not going to be an engineer."
Yeah.
So went back to West Georgia. I stayed at Mercer, went to law school. We reconnected my third year in law school, and we're married a year later.
That's cool. And so that was how many years ago? How many?
Gosh, we've been married. This is the best thing about getting married in the year 2000. It is 2024, so it was 24 years ago.
Yeah,
Got
so
married.
that's what we got married in 02. And so that's why I'm always like, do the math. I got married 2 days after my birthday, so I'd never forget
Oh, that is fantastic.
our anniversary.
Yeah.
And so we were 02. Actually, Stace and I met in Carrollton, so we both went
Oh,
to
wow.
West Georgia. Yeah.
Nice.
So that's cool. Well, cool. All right. So you have done a lot. You've been a lot of places. So you graduated from law school, right?
Yep.
Practiced law for
Unfortunately, yeah, like 6 years.
6 years.
Yes.
6 years.
Worst job ever.
Yeah. And so what makes it the worst? Because I have
So,
a couple
okay.
questions.
Yeah, okay. No.
Around jobs.
I actually
So,
probably the worst job I ever had was being on a city council. That actually was the worst job for kind of the same reason. With law, there are these things called clients, and they have problems.
Sure.
And you can find the solution. The solution's fairly easy to figure out, but they always hate someone and they just want to sue them. And I also had to do indigent criminal defense.
Okay.
I was required at the time in the district that I worked in that if you wanted to be a lawyer, you had to give a part of your time to work for indigent clients.
So like the pro bono
Yeah,
kind of thing.
and
yeah.
it was eye opening. You got paid a tiny amount of money to work with people who I never encountered one who wasn't guilty of something, but it really was kind of eye opening. Like, so I grew up overseas, and I didn't have like a mind towards race relations in this country or anything. And here I am now as a lawyer having to help indigent criminal defendants. All but I think 2 of them were black. They had hard lives, had been in and out of gangs, were hiding from gangs or in gangs. And it was just an eye-opening experience to really open your eyes to a side of society you really didn't know existed. And just kind of this naive kid now helping a guy who claims that someone planted crack in his car and he's just struggling with addiction.
Yeah. God, it's so crazy because I grew up in Roswell, Georgia. Like, it was a nice little town. You know, we didn't really experience much. And so just listening to you, kind of like all the different places you've been, I'm like, man, I am sheltered.
You saying Roswell's little, I go to Roswell now. I'm like, boy, this place is big.
Yeah, Roswell has exploded.
Yeah, Atlanta ate it.
Yeah, I mean, that's so when my parents were there, it was, you know, it was still a farming community, you know, and so it's just it's grown so much, but it's no Dubai, you know, or everywhere else that you're going. So, all right, so we get through 6 years.
6 years.
Laws. What was it, the Macon City?
Yeah, I was on Macon City Council. So
Macon City
when I was
Council.
practicing law, a group of friends started a political site called Red State, and they needed an election lawyer, which I was, to be in charge of it. So they put me in charge of it. And I'll never forget, I had one of the lawyers at my law firm came in. He was a partner. I was an associate, and I was like a year from being a partner. And he came in and he closed the door and he looks at me and literally his name's Tripp. And he says, "Do you know what the definition of a dumbass is?" I said, "No." He said, "You." I said, "You are miserable. You love politics." I was running campaigns out of my law office. I was flying around the country doing congressional races and stuff. He's like, "Go do politics. Don't practice law."
Yeah.
And we had just had my wife had just had a baby, and I informed her that I was going to quit being a lawyer to go be a blogger. Went over real well. Actually, I told her before Evelyn was born, and she went into like false labor. It freaked her out so bad. And I mean, we have this baby, and I quit practicing law with a safety net to go essentially write about politics for a website. And it just kind of exploded from there, and wound up getting hired by CNN, falling into radio, and decided to run for my city council in Macon, which was probably one of the dumbest things I've done. It's a terrible job.
Yeah. This is why I think I'm so intrigued by your story, because ours are actually very similar. So I my brother started a successful insurance brokerage, and I worked with him for about 5 years, and I hated it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I loved working with him. I loved the people. It was a very like relationship building business. You're building a book of business, but insurance just didn't do it for me. Like I needed something kind of tangible. And so, not blogger, but I told my wife I was going to go sell barbecue on the side of the road. And she looked at me like I had 3 eyes. And she's like, wait. We have 2 young kids, and you're going to leave a book of business to go do this. And I said, look, if you want me to be the best husband and father that I can be, I think I have to do this. Because the security, while it's great, I'm not living like what I think God has put in my heart to do.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that's where I think it doesn't matter whether it's politics or food or running a business or whatever it is. Like, I think you kind of find what you're passionate about and go for it.
I think so.
Which is why I think so many people listen. I always ask, like, before we start, like, hey, is there anything off the books? Like, or something you don't want to talk about? You're like, no. In fact, I'm an oversharer. Kudos.
Yeah.
I am too. So what is something that you don't get to talk about on a daily basis just because you're talking politics? Like, tell us a little bit about your family. Like,
actually having this conversation with you, food, do you know that my bosses between theology and cooking, they're like, these are the 2 topics you should shut up about. The research shows that, my family I've put them through a wild ride. I mean, my wife married a guy who was going to be a lawyer.
Yeah.
I'm not an extrovert, but my wife, if she could like be a hermit in a cave somewhere and never encounter another person, she probably would.
She'd be cool with it.
And yet now, like, she goes somewhere and people know she's my wife. And what does Eric think about? Like, she doesn't listen to the show. She actually got in an argument with my mom one time because my parents listen word for word 3 hours every day.
Yeah.
And my wife does not listen. And my mother was like offended on my behalf that I was like, this is how we're still married. I don't listen to him. But yeah, I mean, it's we went through a really rough patch in 2016 with, I didn't particularly support Trump, was pretty vocal about it. And I mean, my kids got beat up at school because of what their dad was saying on radio. My wife was harassed at church. So my wife has this very rare and incurable form of lung cancer. And she literally tells the women at church in her Bible study that she's been diagnosed with this. There is no cure. And this woman comes up to her and says, well, I'll pray for you, but my friends and I want to beat your husband.
Really?
And yeah, it's just because of politics.
Yeah.
And I mean, she still to this day doesn't know how to handle that stuff. Well, we were actually having this conversation last night. And I always feel like there's a lingering sense of guilt I have that I've put my family through this wild ride. I've got the 2 kids in school who election season rolls around, they get anxiety. Like, well, must be an election coming. The Erickson kids are
how old now?
They're now 18 and 15.
Okay, so I have a 17. Actually, Riley will be 18 in March. So I think I'm boy girl.
Yeah. I'm girl oldest, and it's kind of, and now like my oldest headed off to college is like, do I want people to know what my last name is? So I mean, I love my family and they love me, and my job has benefited us in ways I none of us ever expected. But I was going to be a lawyer. That was what my wife signed up for.
Yeah. So your daughter's leaving. Is she already
Yes.
left? Or
No, so she's finishing her senior year,
Yeah,
and
okay.
she's
So they're the
actually
same. He's a
yeah,
senior
she's
too,
going to
yeah.
wind up going to Mercer.
Okay.
We did finally have to tell her you have to move and that you can't stay home. My son and I want a pool table. We
Yeah.
need your room. That
We
didn't go
gotta
over well.
all
Yeah.
have priorities.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So I'm not allowed to get the pool table because I told her I was getting one. And my wife said no. She has to have a place to come.
Yeah.
But we are going to make her be in the dorm, and she wants to be a rocket engineer.
Okay.
She's actually like won awards as a nurse. When she was 5 years old, she started a piggy bank and said she was going to SCAD, Savannah College of Art and Design. And when she hit 10th grade, she got really good at calculus. And she's like, I could still do art, but I can make rockets, and that's what I want to do. We'll see if it holds.
That's crazy. So neither one want to kind of follow in your footsteps.
No, and they both got attitudes and mouth, and they'd probably
Which
like
probably would be good at, right?
yeah, I would think so.
Yeah.
But like, I genuinely really believed that this was not a unique thing, that anyone could sit down in front of a microphone and talk for 3 hours nonstop.
Yeah.
And invited friends of mine when I needed guest hosts to do it. It was like 30 minutes in, they're like done.
Yeah.
And it's my kids definitely have the gift of gab. It is my son. They're both very introverted. My son can go for days without talking to another person other than his friends over his gaming PC.
Yeah.
Which is kind of great because we don't have kids in our house, but he's playing with his friends. My daughter is she could stay in a room and paint all day.
Yeah.
Her room is a disaster
She's
area.
Pretty much like a clone of your wife.
Yeah. I mean, my wife is, she does quilting. She's a fantastic baker. My kids have this artistic streak in them. I can't draw a straight line.
Yeah. Luckily, both my kids got my wife's smarts. So, but neither one of them, I've almost turned my whole family into vegetarians. I probably shouldn't say that. But I think just starting out, like, it's not like you mean to just force feed them, but it's like you're always looking for like confirmation.
Yes.
Like what I'm doing, because I'm like, I'm taking a big risk here.
Mm-hmm.
And I need to make sure you guys have my back because it's going to be hard.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So we're always looking for confirmation. So I'm like, how about pulled pork tacos and slaw and mac and cheese? And they're like, how about salad or cinnamon toast crunch? Or like, what can we do that does not taste like barbecue?
So you saying this, I grew up an exceedingly picky eater.
Yeah.
Our very first trip when we moved to Dubai, like we're there for 3 months and my dad's company is like, okay, you've got to leave now. Find a country to go to for a week. And my mom decided we're going to go to Cyprus. She literally had to go to a grocery store in Cyprus and find a bottle of Heinz ketchup to put in her purse because I wouldn't eat anything on that island unless I had ketchup.
Like chicken tenders? Or
Like
you just anything you have?
If it is meat, I need ketchup.
Okay.
That's why I don't eat steak in public. It's meat. I should have some ketchup with it. Shrimp, it's meat to me.
This is starting to get controversial. We might want to talk about politics.
Yes. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So when I was a kid, though, I had to have ketchup with stuff.
Yeah.
And over time, I developed flavors. Like we had a housekeeper. She was from India.
Yeah.
And I grew up cooking Indian food with her. And like I can make her curry the way I remember she making her curry.
Yeah.
My kids, like I make all of this food. People can see it on Instagram. Nobody in my family eats it. My wife doesn't eat it. It's too fancy for her. My kids don't eat it.
Yeah.
So I have a group of friends of mine who come over on Sunday for bourbon and cigars on Sunday night, and I cook all this food that no one in my family will eat.
Yeah.
Like I get it. My son only wants chicken fingers.
Yeah.
My daughter's beginning like your chili lime rub. I will make shawarma for her, and I'll use the chili lime rub in it, and I mean she'll devour it. But I mean I'll make like deep dish pizzas where the dough is taken 72 hours to rise. They're like, man, can we get Papa John's?
Yeah.
Like, you're killing me. Like gumbo. No one in my family will eat my gumbo.
Oh, man, I always tell people, speaking of gumbo, and then we'll go back. So I'm a Georgia fan. We're 30 minutes from Athens. I grew up here. But I think the best place I've ever been to watch a game is in Baton Rouge.
Absolutely.
And so I will, small caveat, you need to be with some LSU fans.
Yes.
Because then they'll take you around to all the tailgates. But like the food is amazing.
Yeah.
The crawfish etouffee and just like the boudin. Is
Right.
that how you say it?
Yep.
Boudin? All right.
Yeah, so the tailgate experience at Ole Miss is probably the best tailgate experience. The food at an LSU tailgate, hands down the best.
It's incredible. Like
Yeah.
I can still smell it.
Mhm.
It's been probably 20 years since the last
Yeah, and
time.
so when I was growing up, maybe I shouldn't say this on your podcast, but when I was growing up in Louisiana, the drinking age was still 18.
Yeah. In fact, we know because we just drove on those roads last
Yes,
week.
and that is why the roads in Louisiana are so bad. Is they were denied federal highway funds for years because they wouldn't raise the drinking age.
Yeah. In fact, during an ice storm, the roads in Shreveport, Louisiana are even worse.
Yes, Shreveport is South Arkansas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well,
we don't necessarily claim it. Yeah.
I gotcha. Well, that's cool. Okay. All right. So let's get on to food.
All right.
All right. I can tell you're like, here we go.
Yes,
here we
food.
go.
I don't have to talk politics. Thank
All
God.
right. So what I want to know is like, I know you've traveled a lot. So, and you've kind of already mentioned like the Indian like cuisine and stuff, but where's the coolest place you've been? And then does that same like your favorite kind of cuisine like come from that or?
Ooh, okay. So when I was a kid, my favorite place to go is an island off the coast of Malaysia called Penang. We would go all the time. My dad and I, we'd go fishing. You get in these hire this boat, and he'd take you out around those places. It was called Monkey Beach, and the water is crystal clear. Coral below you. You'd catch puffer fish, which I mean you can't do anything with them except throw them back. But you could see like monkeys and tigers on the beach. And it was the coolest thing. And part of it is just I was with my dad. It's the funnest memories I have with my dad is this. But it was the Asian cuisine there in where Malaysia, Thailand, Singapore all are. It's just, you've got the best curries. You've got the best Chinese food. It was fantastic. But when I was a lawyer, my wife and I went to Prague. My law firm would take this retreat every 3 years. We'd find a country to go. We went to Prague one year, and we went to this restaurant. The restaurant had been a restaurant since like the 1100s.
Okay.
And it was chicken cordon bleu and potatoes.
Oh, man.
And it was the best potatoes and the best chicken. And we went into this place that it was a wood burning oven, and they made pizzas, and it was phenomenal. And you couldn't get pepperoni. And my wife, I remember, she got a cheese pizza. She's like, I don't know what this stuff is. I was like, you got to get like the Italian meats on this pizza. You've got to get the prosciutto. And I mean, to this day, it's like the best pizza I've ever had was at this. It was a boxcar converted into a restaurant in an alley in Prague, and it was fantastic.
That's cool. That's cool. You know what's it's crazy when we're talking about like Asian style food. And so Jeremy and I went to Australia and back in, I think it was last September, to visit our team over there. And he's like, there is like Thai and Asian Chinese food everywhere. Like, and not only that, it's fantastic. Like just the fresh seafood and just the different ways of preparation.
Yeah.
Like,
that was one of the odd things about Dubai is at the time in the 80s, just because of aviation, if you wanted to fly from Europe to Asia, Asia to Europe, or really the U.S. to Asia, you stopped in Dubai.
Yeah.
It was kind of the crossroads of the world with a massive airport, refueling center. So all the food was like the best Chinese food I grew up with, the best Mexican food grew up with, you name it. There was a Chinese restaurant. Every Wednesday night we would order Chinese food, fried wontons, sweet and sour chicken, lo mein, and we got so regular that they would call us when the restaurant opened at 5 and ask if we were home. And they would, I mean, it's what we did every Wednesday night. And I grew up eating Chinese food and Indian food, and me, a super picky eater, but I mean, I was super picky about was my chicken curry or my beef curry, and then moved back to Louisiana where they're sucking heads off crawfish. That's a bridge too far for me.
I don't think so. I love it. There is nothing like that is our mission statement. It like all wrapped up in one is like a long table with paper on it, and you got like a low country boil out there with crawfish, and you can just hang out. You're all standing.
I can't do it.
Picking crabs or
it's like I don't necessarily have OCD, but my gosh, it's so messy. It's like
dip it in ketchup.
I just need. Well, yeah, okay, you got me there, but yeah, it's so messy.
I know.
Yeah,
I love it. I love it. You got to grab your drink like this. You know,
yes,
like on the side and
yeah. I just the thing I love about food is like breaking bread with people, particularly after COVID. Everybody's gotten so isolated. It's something I actually spend more time on radio, I think, talking about this issue of just find a really simple recipe and invite friends over, and it's good for you. You've got this picture in scripture of I mean, Jesus and the apostles eating at the Last Supper, but after the resurrection, he wants to like redeem Peter. He's grilling fish on the beachside for it. So much of it involves food. It's good for the soul.
It is. That's exactly what it is. It's good for the soul. And I think that's where, so we experienced a significant increase in business during COVID. I think it's everyone's so used to going out to eat. Now, all of a sudden they're at home and they realize they don't know how to cook.
Yeah.
Which is good for a seasoning company because, now we're at least flavoring it. But like we work so hard, like just trying to develop recipes, getting them out there, doing instructionals and stuff like that. And we would get more feedback from people like, thank you. Like it wasn't good the first time, but we all sat around a table. You know what I mean? And like you just keep, and that's why we always say, keep experimenting, like keep trying new things.
Yeah.
But that's really what I think it is. People always ask like, we'll make brisket and all this, like a huge barbecue spread, and we'll take it and we'll set it up and serve it. And they're like, aren't you going to eat? And I'm like, no, this is my joy.
Right.
Like the preparation and the serving is my joy. Like, what are you going to eat? I was like, I'm going to go eat a peanut butter and jelly sandwich because it's not about the eating for me.
Yeah.
It's about like the serving and like seeing that. And this is a difference, I think. And this is what really sells it for me. And this is what keeps me, I guess, the why behind it. And it's really the smiles. Like in insurance, no one's ever smiling.
Right.
Like no one's smiling. You roll in, it's always a renewal meeting. There's never good news. You're always delivering bad news. Like you bring, anytime we go and drop off food or someone gets an order or something, they're like, the barbecue guys are here.
Right.
And it's like, that's like that instant gratification. And then like they're going to come back for it and anything that they can pass along.
It's funny you say that. The number of meals I've made in my life where I never even wanted to eat them, just wanted to make it for other people. Yeah. To this day, I do that. I thought it was funny. When I met my wife, she baked therapeutically. She'd make a dozen cookies and throw them away.
Yeah.
I was like, why?
Address
yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I mean, ever since I was a kid, so I got into cooking. This is before we moved to Dubai. So I had to be like late 4, early 5.
Yeah.
And I was notoriously picky. Like I can remember the things that I ate. I ate raw hot dogs and dry spaghetti was my diet. Dry spaghetti noodles. When I was 5 years old, I could eat a box of dried spaghetti. I know, weird kid. I'm from Louisiana.
What you mean is like they're not cooked.
They're not cooked. They're just
like
out of the box.
Out of the box.
Yes. Yeah, I would eat that, and I would eat like hot dogs. Yes,
no
and hamburgers. My mom actually convinced me to eat a taco by telling me it was how Mexicans ate hamburgers, because I would not eat it unless it had a connection to a hamburger. To this day, like I go to a fancy restaurant, I judge it by the quality of their hamburger. Yeah. But my mom finally got fed up and literally bought me a step stool and like little pots, and she's like, "You're going to learn to cook." And I'm 5 years old, and she's like teaching me how to boil water because she's just done.
Yeah.
And so I started when I was 5 years old cooking my own food.
Yeah.
And over time, she'd buy me a cookbook, and I would just start making food for the family. And I got so much pleasure out of making food for everybody else. I didn't care whether I liked it or not. I was making like Flemish style carrots that have cognac in them, and there's no way I'm eating it, but my dad loved them. Yeah. I think it's just like the cognac in them, but yeah, I mean, it's so much fun to make food for other people.
Well, I think that's what I love about like your social media channels is like just seeing like the cinnamon rolls and because I know that the same passion that you put into that 3-hour show every day, and like, let's also not take away from, while it is a 3-hour show, there's so much more that people don't understand that goes on behind the scenes to make that go off, right?
Yeah. And, I've been really blessed around with a great team. Philip, who's here with us, Charlie, my producer, both of them stalked me online to get jobs. And I mean, it's like, people ask me how long it takes. It's like a minute per minute research to show.
Yeah. That's what, so before we sat down for this, we were over at the manufacturing spot. And a lot of what's crazy is, even though we're in the barbecue seasoning business and you're in, what would you even call it? Like just the news?
Yeah, I guess news radio. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter really what business you're in. You all experience pain and the joy and then growth. Like growth. Tell us a little bit about like the growth that you guys have experienced over the past couple of years. And then you can tell us on air or off air, but how do you deal with it? Like that's what I need.
Yeah. Okay. First of all, if I have what I think is like my most obvious character flaw that I can see, and it doesn't come across as a flaw to anyone else, is people pleaser. I have a very hard time telling anyone no.
I'm the same way.
I feel bad telling people no and overextend myself. And I've actually had to put walls around me with my assistant and Charlie, my producer, and Philip and others just to be able to run interference for me, because otherwise I'll max out my calendar on.
Yeah.
And that also puts my family at a disadvantage because I can tell them no easier than anyone else, it seems. But the growth in that business has been so crazy. So I started out 9 to midnight on WSB, the only person they ever hired who had not already had a job in radio. They thought I had a job in radio, and they were sorely mistaken.
Yeah.
So they hire me for a weekday show. Within 4 months, I'm 7 to 10 p.m. Within a year, I'm the evening drive time host, which is the most listened to segment of the day.
Yeah.
And was there for 11 years until Rush Limbaugh died. I started filling in for Rush, who actually got me into radio. He was a friend before I was in radio. Had known him for years and filled in for him and Herman Cain and Neil Bortz. And then I got this idea, like I wanted to do syndicated radio, but I was filling in for Rush. So we kind of agreed I could stay in Georgia. And I just started calling radio stations in Georgia saying, I'm going to do a show 9 to noon. And it's just going to be about Georgia politics. Would you put it on? And most of them said yes. So we had about 15 to 20 stations, and I do 9 to noon, and then I do 4 to 6. And when Rush Limbaugh died, I was doing 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. nonstop, and it was killing me. I had a number of years ago gotten clots in my lungs, and from sitting 6 hours a day, I got clots in my lungs.
Really?
I am sitting for 6 hours talking, and it is 6 different hours.
Yeah.
It's not a repackaged 3 hours of the first 3 hours. It was all unique. And I mean, like I thought I could do it. And the first couple of months I could, and it became a problem. We finally were able to negotiate and move it to just 1 3-hour show. I got the rights to syndicate it. We went from like 20 stations to now 45. And really those extra 25 stations came in the last 6 months or so.
Yeah.
We hired a syndicator. The problem is it's so relational, and you have these massive radio conglomerates who own stations, and they have their own people, and so they won't let you on. So you're having to go to smaller stations and build relations with people. I'm not an extrovert. I have a hard time doing it. I've got a great syndicator who's got a great extrovert who knows everyone. But it's been rewarding and also frustrating. Like, if only I had this, I could do that sort of thing. But I'm surrounded by people who they've got my back. I've taken up golf to blow off steam, and I have developed a passion to go to Las Vegas, not because I gamble, but there are great machine gun ranges in Las Vegas, and I can shoot a machine gun and go. Amazing. My favorite Chinese restaurant is in Las Vegas. I can go out there and eat, and I play craps, and I shoot machine guns. And a couple of times a year, just go out and blow off steam.
That's cool.
Being so introverted, though, I don't mean this pejoratively against my family. They know I love them, but every once in a while, I just have to go like park myself somewhere away from everybody, including my wife and kids. So there's a place up in North Georgia called Barnsley Gardens.
Yeah.
I love it.
We actually just went there a few months ago.
Nice.
Beautiful.
I will go up there and get a room and spend a weekend just drinking beer and hitting golf balls and shooting guns. Yeah. And it's my way of decompressing.
They've got the clay course out, or the sporting clay course.
Yeah, I've used it a couple times.
Actually, we did that with Stephen Barnes, my brother, one time. Yeah.
Yes.
Went out there and did that.
It's a ton of fun, but I just, every once in a while, I can feel this level of anxiety building. And it really came about during COVID. I went back to work the week after Christmas. Normally I take 2 weeks off, but there was something happened and I had to start it back before January 1st. And then COVID hit, and I had just launched this syndicated show. And so it is now like June 15th, and I have not missed a single day of work. I've worked Martin Luther King Day. I've worked President's. I've worked Memorial Day. I've done everything because people were getting COVID, and I was not getting sick. To this day, I haven't had COVID. Yeah. And so I'm filling in for everybody else. And David Cannon, who I think you know, he reaches out to me.
David just lives about 15 minutes from here.
Yeah. And we had actually never met each other in person. Someone else I'd befriended over Instagram, and he wanted to take me fly fishing. And he just texted me one night. He's like, I'm not your daddy, but when's the last time you've had a vacation? I was like, why? He's like, because I can kind of tell in radio that you sound burnout. And that is that moment I was like, you know what? I literally have worked 5 days a week every week since the week after Christmas and did not have a vacation. Like our spring break got canceled because of COVID, so I worked through that.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah. And then my wife gets up the next morning and she's like, hey, we need to have a conversation. It's like, what? She's like, you need to go find somewhere for a weekend and go. And that was the moment I was like, you know what? I really need to like unplug from everybody every once in a while.
And so you found that's kind of your way? Because I wrestle with that too.
I feel really guilty every time I do it, but I come back so much more engaged and recharged. And just I'll go with a friend and I don't have to talk work. I don't have to deal with my family. Just given my wife's health, I tend to be the one I've got to go pick up the food. I can do the grocery shopping. So I don't have to take care of anybody for a weekend other than myself.
Yeah.
I can hit golf balls, drink beer, not get in trouble, shoot guns, and it's actually good for me to do.
Yeah.
And I still feel guilty every time I do it.
Well, I think that's probably part of therapy.
Yeah, probably so. Like, yeah.
I think part of it is you get to feel guilty, and then you got to wrestle with that.
Yes, but it's good just to unplug.
That's what I always tell my wife. I'm like, I need a hobby. She's like, no, you don't. No, you don't. Like your last hobby now takes up so many hours a day. And so, but I struggle with the same thing. So I'm also a pleaser by nature. And so I want to, I always tell these guys too, they're like, can you do this? I'm like, yeah. They're like, yeah, but are you going to do it well? I'm like, probably not, because I'm going to try to do 10 other things as well, you know? And so it's a lot of times, and this is what I tell my kids, is like, every time you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else.
Right.
And so like, you just got to make sure you're getting those priorities right. But
and usually what I'm saying no to is like myself.
Yeah.
Like there's something I want to do, but I max it out with other people.
Which if we said yes to ourselves sometimes, like we would be so much better. Like if David's noticing like, hey, you probably, and I think like our teams and our families know us better than we know ourselves. And a lot of times Stacey will be like, hey, why don't you take a day off? And I'm like, I don't think you understand, the schedule is crazy. She's like, and it's like, if you would just take a day, recoup. And I think that's the biggest struggle is like, I feel this pressure to like keep it going in the right direction. But I also have to then stop and realize that like, I didn't get us to this point in the first place. Right. It's because of the team. And if sometimes I would just step aside and let them do their thing, we would be in a much better place. And so, you know, maybe I just need to take a little bit more time off. But.
Yeah. You know, though, I mean, my problem is I take a day off. I mean, my voice isn't on the radio. Somebody's got to do it. And that gets hard. I have discovered golf. It is this terrible, terrible thing.
Yeah.
And I am very bad at it. I don't like.
That's what makes golf fun, though.
Yeah. So I don't even want to get my handicap. I don't play with good golfers because I'm a bad golfer, but I can go out in the afternoon. I will take a bottle of bourbon and cigars and fill up a cup with ice, and I'll just play golf, drink bourbon, smoke cigars, and there's not a care in the world. Yeah. And that has actually become something I can do 2 or 3 hours in an afternoon, and it just recharges me unless I have a really bad game, which tends to be often, but...
As long as you have like a, you know, you bomb it on 18. It's amazing. I'd be like, I'm coming back.
Yeah, there's always that one shot. I literally a couple of weeks ago played the worst round of golf I had ever played, and then birdied a hole that I've never like ever made it to the green on. Yeah. And I was like, okay, I can do this some more.
Yeah.
Such a horrible sport.
Speaking of bourbon and golf, the first time we actually met in person was it's like a fundraiser, right? So tell us a little bit about that. And then it'll get back to the bourbon.
All right.
But
So when I started on radio, like I didn't, to this day, it's hard for me to fathom, like there are literally millions of people who listen to me and millions more who read me a week. And it like that number doesn't make sense. And I was on radio in the evenings on WSB and I mentioned like I'd never been, other than like cheap beer, never really drunk liquor, and discovered the small batch bourbon that I liked and had it at a conference in Florida and mentioned on radio. People started sending me bottles of bourbon.
Yeah.
And I've got this multi-100 bottle bourbon collection, and I don't drink that much. I mean, people think that I do. I really don't. I'll go away on a weekend or go to the golf course, but otherwise, no. And I'm like, I got to do something with it. So my radio station, my flagship station, WSB, does a fundraiser for Children's Healthcare of Atlanta every year. and they were trying to rope me into it. What can I do? It's like, I've got all this bourbon and I like to cook. Why don't I make barbecue and people can come drink my bourbon? And they're like, this is a fantastic idea. So the very first year I ever did it, I brought the entire collection, and I had like 2 massive like beach carts rolling hundreds of bottles of bourbon in. We were having to call Ubers for people, and the lawyers were like, no more than 8 bottles from here on out. None. People were hammered. I got rid of some of the bourbon, and it was a fun time. But I mean, just that alone was raising like $100,000. Just that of people coming, $1,000 come drink my bourbon, eat my barbecue. It really did dawn on me that we had to have a caterer for the barbecue, because there's no way I could do radio, and do all the barbecue. And I really, to this day, want to do it. And I was like, no, Erickson, you're going to kill yourself doing this, which is how I found you to come take care of it. And your brisket's way better than mine. And I love my brisket. But it's been a great event. It's doing it every year. It's like my least favorite day on radio. I hate it because I inevitably encounter someone, particularly with my wife's situation. This past year, I interviewed a guy. He's like, oh, your wife and my son had the same cancer. I was like, well, how's your son? And he's passed away 3 months ago. It's like, oh, now I got to do an interview. And it's great. And I hate it because I'm such an emotional wreck. Philip and I were actually, we did a couple of years ago, had to do one, and they were like, this family, their son, he's been dead for 5 years. They're fine. They've over it. And they just began to melt down on radio, and it was awful. And I got out of there. It's like, I got to go. I need to go sit at a bar, have a beer, and be left alone. And we're at this bar, and I fill this beer, drink this beer. And the woman hands me another. She says, we were listening on the radio. Here's another one. It's like, oh,
that's gotta
be
it was
tough. Bad.
And how is she doing?
She's fine. So she was wild life that the Ericksons have lived. In 2006, my wife was given 6 months to live. The week before Christmas, and I had to be the one to tell her she was going to die. There was a wreck. All the doctors had to go to the ER, and I'm the one like waking her up from anesthesia saying, you've got this cancer. You got 6 months to live. Yeah. And we had a 1-year-old, and they had totally misdiagnosed her. They found this random stuff in her lungs. They presented as like late stage of some form of cancer. But had they not misdiagnosed her 10 years later in 2016, I'm being given 24 hours to live with all these clots in my lungs.
I was going to say, both of you.
Yeah. So literally
stuff in your lungs.
In 2016, every bad story begins with CrossFit, and I had started it and couldn't keep up with it. And it was like, first I'm old, then maybe it's allergies, and then there's something wrong. And my wife made me go to the doctor. Next thing I know, they're wheeling me into an ICU unit saying, you need to call your family. You're probably not going to make it. My wife, in the meantime, is calling me on the phone. And I'm like, well, what's the matter? I'm trying to call you. And she's like, well, I'm on the phone with the Mayo Clinic. They think I have this cancer. And literally like the same moment. Yeah. And turns out I'm fine, obviously. But she has a genetic, extremely rare form of lung cancer, stage 4. And she takes a pill every day. The pill keeps the tumors from growing. The pill lasts for 2 years. After that, there's nothing they can do. And this pill's been working for her for 7 years so far. But it's only supposed to work for 2.
2 years, but it's working.
Yeah, for 7 years. They discovered she has a weird mutation in her genes, and everyone with that mutation, this pill, they don't know how long it works. And the wild part is that during COVID, the other people all kind of died of COVID, so she's kind of like the last one standing. Really? And so they have no idea what the runway on the medicine is. So every 3 months she goes and gets scanned, and if the tumors aren't growing, we're fine.
That's crazy.
So now
does all that happen like locally, or does she?
This is the other wild thing, and this is why I believe in God. The Mayo Clinic, had she not been misdiagnosed, they would have not found it until it was too late. She and Rush Limbaugh had the same genetic cancer, and his was not discovered until it was too late. Her misdiagnosis led to a timely diagnosis by the Mayo Clinic, and they were like, "We would love to be your doctors, but the guy who found your cancer is at Emory in Atlanta." And so he's her doctor, and he came up with the medicine, and I mean, it's all very providential that it happens to be right here.
That's super cool.
So
it's cool that happened.
Yeah,
and everything else sucks.
It is fascinating.
What I found is it's all going to hit us.
Yes,
somehow or another.
But she's gotten really in shape. She now does strongman competition. She pulled a UPS truck.
Really?
Like Halloween weekend, and I got to go to the gym just to make sure she can't out deadlift me these days.
That's crazy. Yeah,
it really is. She's intimidating. She pulled the cancer card and made me buy her a Harley. So she's got tattoos and a Harley. She does strongman, and she's married to me. Yes.
That's awesome. So if there's something that you're like, you guys already live a crazy life.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, well, we don't have much time left. What is one thing that you guys haven't experienced that you would like to together?
Oh, I want to, with her and the kids, where she's very much into building memories and traveling more.
Yeah.
And being able to, this is one reason, like I'm desperate to grow my show and to bring in more revenue only because I want to travel more comfortably with her. Like several years ago, when we had the snowstorm in 2014 and everything was shut down, my wife got the brilliant idea of getting on cookie sheets with my son who was tiny at the time and sliding down the hill. And like a scene from Christmas Vacation, my wife slid down the hill and the cookie sheet hit the ice, went across the road, down the neighbor's driveway, into the neighbor's backyard, and broke her tailbone. And so she, sitting in a plane, kills her. It's like, I want like a ton of money so I can like put you on a private plane and take you somewhere, or at least first class. But I would love to take my family on trips overseas before the kids get too old to do it, and just build those memories with them. I'm actually going to take them. So I like to go shoot guns in Las Vegas. My daughter, for her graduation and her 18th birthday combined, wants me to take them to Las Vegas so she can shoot machine guns. So for Memorial Day week this year, we're going to go to Las Vegas. I'm going to take them in a helicopter to the bottom of the Grand Canyon, and then we're going to shoot machine guns, and that'll be a ton of fun.
Spit off the Hoover Dam too, right? So if you walk up to the ledge and you spit, then you got to duck and it blows back.
Hadn't done that.
Yeah, you do it when your son's standing there, spit and duck, and then
yeah. My kid would try to pee.
That's my favorite part. Yeah.
Yep, he would try to pee off the Hoover Dam and see what happens.
So my son, for his trip, we're going to take him to Park City to snow ski.
Nice.
So here's what's crazy is my kids. Well, we've done a ton of things. There's two things they haven't done, and which is why I was asking you is they haven't snow skied and they haven't seen blue water. And when I say that, I say that because we've grown up going to Hilton Head and St. Simon's, all of which is probably the reason why I don't care for the beach. Like it's awful sand, it's crappy water. You got
Hilton Head's one of my favorite places, by the way.
What is
Hilton Head is one of my favorite places.
Like as far as food and atmosphere, and I love that it's flat and you can walk everywhere. But that's their thing, and blue water, and I'm like, oh my gosh, how sheltered have you guys been that you've never seen?
That's funny.
Water?
I took them. So we go to Hilton Head every spring break. And when I was in law school, my best friend had actually been in a really bad plane crash, got a lot of money from U.S. Air, and bought houses all over Hilton Head, rented all of them, had one. So I started going into law school, and it was kind of my happy place. Go decompress, go study for exams. So to this day, take my family, we rent a beach house, bring my in-laws. But we went to Rosemary Beach one time. That was my first time seeing like crystal clear water. And I grew up 2 blocks from the beach in Dubai, but it wasn't like the beach there.
Yeah.
And it was amazing, but I don't like the beach because I'm Swedish and thinking about the sun makes me burn.
So I don't like, well, the sun I'm okay with, but it's the sand and like sweating.
Yes.
And it just doesn't work for me.
I would rather hang out at the pool or go to like the Salty Dog and grab a beer and hit golf balls.
Yeah. So my my mother-in-law and father-in-law are awesome. And so they've been going to Hilton Head forever. And their favorite place, I don't know if you've been there, is the Sea Shack.
Oh, my in-laws love it.
It's amazing. Like every day at 11 o'clock, we're at it's a shack, but like they walk in and it's like they're in Cheers. And everyone's like, hey, how are you guys doing?
It is.
But it's like the most, it's simply done, but it's amazing.
It really is. Those are some of the best places. Growing up in Louisiana, the gas station food culture in South Louisiana is incredible.
You get a sandwich?
It's so I'm still trying. When I was a kid, there was a barbecue beef recipe. And it was a barbecue beef po' boy. Yeah. And to this day, I can just taste it. And I'm trying as hard as I can to duplicate this barbecue beef po' boy recipe. And it's like the last people I know who had the recipe, they're dead. It's like, how do I like find this recipe? And I finally found a cookbook. And it was a guy who went to the gas stations of South Louisiana and got the family recipes. And there's a barbecue beef. And it's as close as I can get it. But I got to make some changes.
So what do you love more, the process, like the road to get there, or the end result?
All right. This is Erick Erickson was a nerd growing up.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, you didn't have to have like licenses to buy chemicals in Dubai.
Yeah.
And I loved chemistry. And I had a mad scientist laboratory. I mean, I had like multi-liter bottles of
Yeah.
sulfuric acid, and I loved just blowing stuff up in the backyard,
Yeah.
mixing stuff. And that's kind of what I do with cooking is
I'm the same
like
way.
I have a cookbook collection that's probably 250, 300 cookbooks.
Yeah.
I don't cook out of them. I just read them. And then I get inspirations like, okay, this recipe had it this way. I can now do it this
Yeah.
way. And I just love the mixing and the experimentation of it. It's one thing that pisses my wife off so bad. She's like, you never make the same thing twice. You never write it down. I was like,
That's what-
yeah, but it's so much fun.
I'll have to be like, hey, these people are coming over. I'm like, sweet, I'm going to try something new. She's like, why?
Yes.
Why would you do that? I'm like, why wouldn't I do that? Like,
Right.
they don't eat the same thing they had last time, and I don't want to make the same thing. For me, it is part of the process, and that's where I wish sometimes I took a step back and enjoyed more of the process of business.
Mm-hmm.
Like, as you talk about growth and growing the stations and like that drive to get there, where is there? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
where
I
is
don't know
there?
that
Like,
there will ever be like I have metrics of like I'd love to be on by the end of this year 100 stations, ultimately get to like 600 stations, 700 if that's possible. In my head, I kind of have like a revenue of annual revenue I would like to hit, but I just there for me is 3 hours every day behind this microphone, just entertaining people.
yeah.
Is I mean, I guess to that degree I've hit it, but I still want to be on more stations
But you're
to
still
meet
doing
more
it,
people.
so you haven't hit
Yeah.
where, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I don't know that like I can conceive of myself dying behind the microphone. Like, why would I ever want to retire? I guess
Yeah.
if my ratings suck, I get canceled.
Well, let's wait till we wrap this
Yeah.
episode, or else like that might
right.
not be
Yeah,
good
exactly.
for the next one. But
Yes.
yeah. Well, that's so. I mean, if talk about growing. So, do you notice like is it easier to grow during an election year? Because I mean, I know right now everything is crazy.
Yeah, you know, this is actually my first election year, presidential election year in syndication, and I think it may be easier, but people are trying to lock in their voices now. And then radio contracts are weird, and you have this dynamic with the big companies have their own people. What frustrates me is like, and I don't mean this to sound arrogantly, I really don't, but like I've never in any job I've ever had, never thought I was just good. Like I was adequate. In this job, like I know that I'm really good at it.
You are really
I'm
good at it.
really good at it. And I know what my ratings are compared to everyone else in the industry. And so I know I'm the best. But having that then translate into a station saying, oh, no, actually, we have this guy. We're happy with him. I was like, but I know I could give you better ratings. It's really hard to do. And
Yeah.
it sounds so arrogant to say, too, because I don't like talking up my success. But I'm not comfortable doing it. But I mean, my ratings are really good. And I literally fell into it by accident. I did never at a moment in my life.
Can you tell us?
Oh
the
yeah,
story?
I can tell the story.
Okay.
So
I heard this earlier, and I'm like, I wonder if we should talk about that. But I think we probably
yeah,
should.
so I was running redstate.com and I got hired by CNN and the CNN's pitch to me was we're a news network at the time, headquartered in Georgia and have no one who sounds like or looks like they could relate to people in Georgia. They were trying to be more bipartisan, I guess you could say. So
Yeah.
they hired me. Actually, Rush Limbaugh, I called him and we texted. And I was like, should I do this? Fox News was looking at me and CNN was looking at me. He said, go to CNN first. You need to learn how to talk to people who hate you before you just talk to people who
Yeah.
agree with you. So I went to CNN. It was great, really great advice. Met a lot of friends, disagree with on politics. James Carville, Donna Brazile, people like that who I grew up with as the enemy became friends. We just don't talk politics. So I'm there for 3 years. And while I'm there, I'm in Macon. And the local radio show host who did the morning show got arrested in a crack house. And said he was making a rap label.
Rap.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he and the guys he was with, they all got arrested high as kites. And I actually believe it was marijuana. They were high. So the news director of the station calls and says, you're on CNN. You've been on to talk about politics. But is there any chance you could like do a show? I had no
Yeah.
idea. I was like, I'll give it a try. So I did 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. on a Thursday. And the program director came in and said, would you mind coming back tomorrow? We're still dealing with the situation. I said, sure. So I went back that Friday. He came in at the end of the show, 9 a.m., and says, so we fired the guy. Problem was the news cameras showed up, and he said he fell off the wagon, which wasn't the problem. It was the again was the problem.
Right.
And so, yeah, okay, he lied about his drug use. So I wound up doing 3 months. I got paid in a $100 gift certificate to Outback Steakhouse that was expired, which I didn't know they expired, but they expire.
Yeah.
And took my wife. The only reason I know is I had to buy dinner. But while I was doing that, Herman Cain in Atlanta decided he was going to run for president. The head of Cox Media Group was driving through Macon on his way to Disney World, was listening to talk radio, heard me and thought it was my show. And they offered me Herman's job. It was like, they liked it. I could fit in for Herman. Had no idea I was a radio guy. Literally, they're taking me to the Four Seasons in Atlanta. I've never been to it. Couldn't afford it. They're taking me there to like do the negotiations. Yeah. I didn't have an agent. Only when I signed the contract did I tell them, by the way, guys, never done radio in my life other than this 3 months.
This should be fun.
The look on their face, it was priceless. Yeah. It really was. And they started with, would you do a weekend show? It's like, I'm on CNN. I'm doing Red State. I got a family. No, I'm not giving up my weekends. They're like, well, would you fill in for Herman Cain? Yes. So I go up and I fill in for him, and they come in and they're like, we want you to take Herman's show. Would you do it? And I was like, I got to talk to my wife. But yeah. And so my wife was fine with it. I called Rush Limbaugh and he was like, I will never talk to you again if you don't do this.
Yeah.
So I did it. He vouched for me as a radio guy. It was funny. A number of people who I knew, and I wouldn't say they were friends at the time. They are now, but they all knew me. And they were the people they reached out to. They're like, oh, yeah, he's a radio guy. He would be great. They all knew I wasn't. And everybody lied for me. And now it's the longest job I've ever had.
That's what we all need is a bunch of people that'll lie
Yes,
for us.
exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
I think that's probably we also need Jesus too.
Yes, totally.
At the same time. But, well, that's cool. So you said something, it was pretty quick, but you're talking about James Carville and like people that you don't necessarily agree with.
Right.
Politically and like your stance. But how is the relationship? Like, you always wonder, like, you got the left and the right. And you know the way your politics are set up, and then when the cameras are off,
right?
Like, is it one big party where everyone can? Yeah, and that's what I love about food, is I think food can really bring fellowship.
Right. Yes, to a degree. Like I'm kind of in this odd boat where there are a lot of people on my side of the aisle I don't necessarily get along with. Because I really see the political fight differently from them, and they either resent it or that they think I should go about it differently. And I get along with a lot of the Democrats. One, because a lot of them let me back up. When you see on TV the guy who is the political strategist, oftentimes there's someone who licked envelopes in the back of a campaign. They have no political experience, but their daddy's connected and they got on TV. And those were the guys I didn't get along with. Yeah. And Donna Brazile and James Carville and them, they all thought I was that guy, and that CNN just wanted some fat redneck from the South to be on TV. And they really, like, my boss at the time finally admitted one day when they hired me, this entire group of people, Republicans and Democrats at CNN, went to the boss and said, we're going to quit if you hire this guy. Yeah. Because they absolutely did not want me with them at CNN. And then I got there and they knew I realized like I had run campaigns. I wasn't just an envelope stuffer. Yeah. I knew what I was doing. And I was from Louisiana. A lot of them were. We could connect that way. And once you got to know each other, it's like we all have the same problems. We're all dealing with issues. Yeah. We may see the world differently, but I personally believe that, I mean, if we're all created in the image of God, we got something to learn from each other, whether we agree on politics or not.
Absolutely. Man, all right. So we're going to wrap up here in a second. So I know if this airs and we haven't asked anything about the election cycle, it'll be.
Thought this was a food podcast. I gotta leave now.
It'll be our last episode. But what kind of fireworks are we expected to see?
Oh my gosh,
this season? I know, like they had the primaries last night. Yeah, and so I
would rather like have my teeth pulled out without anesthesia than go through what we're about to go through. Yeah. And I mean, look, it's great for ratings, but I'm not excited about it. And I realize like there are diehard fans for both guys. And I'm like, can we not do better than 280-year-olds? Like I got to know years ago, Jeb Bush is a very nice guy, but like in 2016, we had a meeting and we were talking about support. I said, I can't support you. It's like, it would be a damning indictment on the country if we had all of these people running for president and we settled on a Clinton and a Bush again. Yeah. Is there no one better? And I kind of feel like that this time. No disrespect however any of your listeners fall, but is the best we can do to 80-year-olds when we have all these other people.
Yeah.
And that
Do you
frustrates
think
me.
that's what's wrong with the system right now, though?
Yeah, to a degree, I do. It's both sides, I think, want a refight of 2020.
Yeah.
Republicans think it was stolen. Democrats think it was legitimate. You got a lot of people split between, and everybody just wants that rematch. Meanwhile, I think the people who are most passionate about it forget that half of the country isn't as political as them.
Yeah.
And that if they're as concerned about it and they care about it as much, everybody else must as well. And really, no. Most people, they're getting their kids ready to school. They're going to work. They got little league practice. They're not eaten up with politics. And
Yeah.
I spend a lot of time talking to those people about politics because they tune into me because otherwise they don't have time to care about it. And they're all just angst-ridden by, do we have to go through this again? Nobody wants it. And that, I think, is unfortunate. That being said, it's going to be ratings gold. Donald Trump is one of the funniest people you can cover in politics.
Yeah.
There was this one time he called me. I was in this pizza restaurant, and I get this unknown number that calls, and I answer the phone, and this is why I knew that story from his first impeachment trial was real, that he was so loud everybody in the restaurant could hear him,
Yeah.
because this phone answers, and I hear, "It's your favorite president." And it's like this record screeches to a halt and everyone turns, and it's yes, he's calling. He called me one time when the kids were out in school and I was in drive-through or in the carpool line getting them. The windows were down and like people are walking by like staring like, that sounds like Donald Trump on the phone. And he is a funny. I don't see eye to eye with him. I'm not a big fan, but he is exceedingly funny to cover. And in fact, I'm not a Joe Biden fan either, but he's funny to cover too. And the dumb things they both say that they don't mean to say, and the crazy things Trump says that he does mean to say to get a rise out of people, just make it exceedingly entertaining.
This is what I love.
Cover
People
politics.
followed us around with, well, I guess you do get followed around with cameras all the time, but like, I say tons of dumb stuff.
Yes.
The problem is no one's recording.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So like, I
would
think
get
if
canceled.
we were all followed around, it's like if we wrote our thoughts down, people would be like, that guy's nuts.
Yes.
We all are nuts.
I have
You know
a
what I
group
mean?
chat
Like,
with friends of mine. I've been friends with theirs for years, and like literally every 6 months we just delete it and start over. Because like if anybody ever found us, we would all lose our jobs.
Yeah.
Yes.
But that's
And
really it. Is
the
like,
charming part of it is Trump says all that stuff out loud. Everything the rest of us say privately, he says out loud, which is why so many people love him.
Yes, that's good, man. Well, this has actually, what's funny is I was like, man, you talk 3 hours at a time. I'm thinking we're going to do 45 minutes. Then I'm thinking, I could sit here and talk for 3 hours. Like, that's crazy. So super personable. Thank you. Like, really just thank you so much for coming out, for you and Philip making the drive.
But look, I would
sitting here with us.
Honestly, when you asked me to do this, I was like, why on earth would he want to talk to me? But I'm glad. And you know, honestly, what you do makes my life easier because I experiment and play around with the rubs. But the sad thing is my son, so random story at the end, dragging it out, I realized, but there was this restaurant when I was a kid, it's this hole in the wall dump called Bobby's Drive-In.
Yeah.
And they had the best ice cream and the best onion rings. I love onion rings. And they were floured. They weren't like the bready battered. You saw a lot of the onion, and one of the very first things I ever wanted to learn to cook was duplicating Bobby's Drive-In onion rings.
Yeah.
And I could never, ever get the flavor profile right until one day I got Ryan Lane's signature seasoning.
Yeah.
I swear to you, like note for note, it is.
Bobby's.
And my son would have me make those onion rings every single day. And when the canister gets low, he's like, Dad, you got to order some more. You got to make the onion rings. And it is, I can make some onion rings.
It's funny. I'll have like, you'll mention lanes like on your show where you're talking about chili lime or the onion rings or something like that. And I'll have buddies like, oh my God, Erick Erickson just mentioned you on the thing. They're like, what'd you pay him? And I was like, we don't really have that kind of marketing budget.
Yeah.
I was like, we didn't pay him anything. I was like, he went on the website like you should do and buy stuff.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah, Ryan does it. Although you give me a good gift basket for this, but I buy my Lane's barbecue rubs and now if I could just get the RecTech guys to come in and I sell them
Ray's
some stuff.
gonna be up here in a couple weeks.
I sell some grills.
We got to
for
take
them.
a trip down there.
I really want to. That would be a lot of fun.
To see. It's what they have done over the past, I guess, 10 years is insane.
It really is. I just not just a well-run business, the fact that they give you the CEO's cell phone when you order the grill, but they're so well made, and you can just tell these guys like. I honestly feel like I'm cheating because I gave up my big green egg,
Yeah.
and now I'm using pellets. But I mastered my big green egg. I could make a great brisket. I could do ribs. I could do anything on it. I can make pizza on it. And at some point, I just wanted something where I can open my phone, flip open the app, turn it on, and be done with it instead of waiting for it to come up temperature. And like I feel like I'm cheating, but man, it's so much easier to do.
It is easier. We flip flop, or I might reverse sear something like on the Rec Tech, and then I'll fire up the KJ or something and sear it off. Almost use it as like a sear station. But
so my first
so many ways to do
big purchase to this day, my wife has no idea how much I spent on this thing. But I had a Weber grill, and I was like, I want a professional grill. So there's this company out of New Zealand called DCS, and they make these incredible grills, and they're so expensive. And they have these cast iron grates. They sit at an angle, and so the drippings funnel down, and they get up to like 1,500 degrees because they have ceramic rods. So instead of having a sear burner, the entire thing sits on ceramic rods, so you can get the whole thing hot. And to this day, like I've had this grill now for 10 years, and it's as good today as it was the first day.
That's awesome.
And between the Rec Tech, and then I've got the Blackstone, and now I want the pizza oven. And I've just got this outdoor kitchen. I don't have the money to like landscape the backyard for it all, but one day I will have my outdoor kitchen. There's a guy in Atlanta, Vince Longo. He's a builder, and I was like, one day you're gonna.
Vince.
Oh yeah.
In fact, Vince is from Louisiana.
Yes.
We sent him a purple and gold Lanes shirt.
Nice.
He builds some beautiful homes.
He does, and like one day, Vince, you are going to build my house for me. And I get these emails from him all the time. Here's what it's like. I got to win the lottery to build this house, but one day I'm going to have the best outdoor kitchen ever.
His stuff is his homes are amazing.
Yes.
So the design is perfect. All right, we're about to wrap up. I got one question.
All right.
One thing, you kind of talked about like your favorite meals kind of growing up, but now like what's one thing that your family will just sit down and eat? Like it's your last meal sitting around together before your daughter leaves for college. Like what is that one thing that just will remind her of home?
Remind my kid of home. Of all the things, it's the simplest thing to do is grilled hamburgers with onion rings.
Yeah.
And they love them. My wife's favorite thing that I make, it's the very first dish I ever made for when I was a kid. My mom got me my first cookbook. I still have it. The Betty Crocker Jr. cookbook.
Yeah.
And it was cornflake chicken, which is just crushed up cornflakes. You dip the chicken in butter that is loaded with Tony Chachere's Cajun seasoning, roll it in the cornflakes, and you bake it. And to this day, it's like anniversary, that's what you got to make me.
Try it with Doritos too.
You know, I would do that, but she would not do that.
Well, you just make
she does it with Ritz
Tell
crackers.
her you got to keep experimenting.
That's true. Can't experiment. I'll get divorced.
That's right. That's right.
Got to duplicate it.
And she already puts up with so much.
She really does.
So
My wife puts up with a ton of
Keep
stuff.
it with cornflakes.
Yes.
That's good. All right, Eric, man, I know it's going to be a busy year. It's a busy year always, but this one's going to be a crazy one for you. So just the fact that you took the time out means the world to us. So thank you so
absolutely
much.
happy
and
to do it.
hopefully we can have you back as it gets closer, and we'll see. Actually, we can come to Macon.
You bring me back whenever you want. I'm happy to make the drive. It's a pretty drive from there to here,
actually,
just in the country. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yep.
So, awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Oh, actually, real quick, where can everyone find you online, social media, all that?
It is okay. So if you got a phone available to make it really easy, you can always text my name, Erick, ERICK, to 33777, or you can go to ericerickson.com, ERICK, ericerickson.com. I finally bought that website. There's been some guy in Florida, not to extend this podcast, but there's an old man in Florida who makes horror masks for Hollywood studios.
Yeah.
And his name is Erick Erickson. And for years, he would never sell me. I don't know what happened to him. He's still alive, apparently. But he finally abandoned ericerickson.com, and GoDaddy sent me an email. I snapped it up as quick as I could. So finally, ericerickson.com.
See, maybe that's the top.
Maybe
You know
so.
what I mean?
I've reached the pinnacle. Time to
That's it.
retire.
That's it. Awesome. Well, thank you guys for tuning in. Remember, you got to like it. You got to share it. Do all that kind of stuff.
Do all that stuff.
Follow, leave a review, and just thanks for tuning in. We appreciate you. See you soon.